from today. I am Kyler Cheatham with Third Stage Consulting Group, and I am joined by my colleagues, Eric Kimberling and Adam Cheatham, for a special event live stream this morning to celebrate Third Stage's fifth anniversary. So, first and foremost, happy fifth anniversary to Third Stage's two most tenured employees. So, congratulations to you, Adam and Eric. We're going to get into some fun questions, but first, I want to go through some logistics. If you've ever joined on the live stream, you can just pop your comments or questions right where you're joining from. We are live on YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And we'd love to know where you're joining us from to kind of just test that feature right now. So if you could go ahead and just pop where you're joining us from, we'd love to hear our global audience. And with that, we are going to play a little game to get started to have our fun Thursday live stream. So we're going to play a Would You Rather software edition. But first, before that, if you don't know Eric and Adam, I'm going to let them introduce themselves and just talk a little bit about their role here at Third Stage. So, Adam, let's start with you.
Yes, my name's Adam Cheatham. I'm managing director at Third Stage Consulting Group. 5 years ago, Eric came to me and said, "I'm starting a new company, and would you like to join?" And I said, "Well, that depends." Obviously, it turned out fairly well for each of us. Really proud to be here. This is a great milestone for Third Stage Consulting Group. So glad to see so many people from so far away. I see Lebanon, India. The Netherlands. I saw Nigeria in there, of course, Denver, London.
Whoa, you're
keep
stealing
on
my
bringing
job
them in.
there, buddy.
Well, I just am fascinated by it. I love our reach. I love our company. It's just a great position for us to be in, and just great resounding success that shows with the people that love to join us on these. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And over to you, Eric, obviously CEO and founder. Maybe give us kind of your overall vision of starting the company and some exciting milestones to kick us off today.
Sure. Well, I'd love to say that I had this really deliberate, well thought out strategy when I started the company, but that wasn't quite how it worked. I was a bit terrified when I started the company, having left my previous company that I'd started before, and to start this one was a very difficult decision. It was a hard time for me personally. So it's really cool to see that not only were we able to survive, not only was I able to just feed my family. That's really my main goal to start, was just to make sure I could not disrupt our income as a family. So it's cool to see us going from that sort of survival mode, will we make it mode, quickly into high growth mode. And I remember about 3 months in, or maybe less, realizing, wow, I think this is really going to take off, and I think this is going to work really well. So, and I think the other cool thing about us as a company that I'm proud of is that our team and our company really values that tech agnostic, client focused approach. In an industry that is sketchy at best at times, and unethical at its worst, and illegal at its worst. I am proud of the fact that we can be sort of that beacon, or that North Star for organizations that just want trusted advice and someone to represent them in their transformations, and really help them through their transformations without trying to sell software, without trying to sell their biases. So love the team we've built, and I think it's we've gone from just myself and Adam and my wife, who's also our CEO or CFO. She should be our CEO.
She should. Yeah.
I really report to her, but we've gone to just a handful of us to now 70 people plus worldwide. So it's been a great trajectory, and great group of clients as well that we work with. So it's a lot of fun.
I was counting worldwide. It's about 100, isn't it?
It's close. It's getting closer to 100. I lose track.
Yeah.
Day to day. So yes, you're probably closer than I am.
Well, excellent. Well, today, to kind of celebrate all of our key learnings, we were going to focus on our top 5 key lessons from digital transformation to ensure that we provide those great best practices to our amazing audience. But before we do that, we always have to have a little bit of fun. And I see some of you have already beat me to it, but in the top corner here, If you are joining on the live stream or on the video, you can scan the QR code to our 2023 digital transformation report, which is kind of our playbook that features our methodology, top software selections. It's a 60-page plus jam-packed report. So if you'd like to download that for free, that's our gift, our birthday gift to you today. But first, let's start out with a little bit of Would You Rather Digital Transformation Edition. So this is an audience engagement as well. So you can put your answer in the actual chat wherever you're joining us from today, and we'll have a little fun. So let's start with just a basic Would You Rather to get us started. So would you rather have a pet unicorn or a pet dragon? So unicorn or dragon, you can pop the emoji too in the chat wherever you're joining. But let's go to you first, Eric. Unicorn or dragon?
Oh man, I was hoping you'd ask Adam first. I can't pass this early, probably, huh? Take a mulligan. I'd say probably a dragon, just because dragons are cool. They breathe fire. They're intimidating. They're dominant. Unicorns to me strike me as something that, not that dragons are real, but to me unicorns are just a made up sort of thing. But dragons are totally real, right? So to me they seem a little bit more realistic. So it's my knee-jerk reaction. I've never really thought through that before, so that's just a knee-jerk reaction. After further analysis, I could change my mind. That's where I stand right now.
Well, this is the goal of this game: is there's no "it depends" allowed. So we're getting into the real meat of it. So Adam,
right.
Unicorn or dragon? And just remember, our 2-year-old daughter is listening at this point, so you do have a biases there.
Well, I've seen Game of Thrones, so I'm gonna go with a dragon because that's I had to find myself thinking, if I was stuck with a dragon or a unicorn and had to fight somebody with the other, where would I rather be? And I would rather be on a dragon.
There you go. And Darren, which I assume is from Wales, on LinkedIn told us, just teaching us that the dragon is actually one of the national emblems of Wales. So there we go. We learn something new every day. But we got a lot of dragons. I will say, I'd be team unicorn on that as well. But so our next one, going into more of a digital transformation, would you rather work with a software that is very user-friendly but lacks advanced features, or a software that is feature-packed but difficult to use? And Adam, we'll go to you first on this one.
I would rather use something that feels natural. A natural fit is always a good thing. And so for me, I would rather use something that was easy and simple and got me what it is I needed quickly and simply, than have to go looking for it and spend extra time on that.
What about you, Eric?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd definitely go user-friendly, less features. Partly because you look at most organizations, they can't get the value out of the simplest technologies as it is. So the last thing they need is more complexity and more features. They just need to figure out how to use the ones they've got. And also another data point I always look at, or not always, I've never been asked this question, so I don't know what I'm talking about or why I would say always. But as I think about it right this moment, one thing I think about is some of the software reviews I do on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. It's funny, the negative comments about whatever software I'm reviewing objectively, where I talk about the pros and cons, I'd say by far the number one sort of negative response I get on those reviews is the user friendliness of the whatever the software is. So it's a lot of times it's product X sucks because it's hard to use. I mean, rarely do I hear, the features are lacking or it can't do certain things. It's usually because it's hard to use. So I think that's something that the world craves more of, is user friendliness.
Absolutely. Very interesting.
There's a differentiator here, though. I would rather use the user friendly software, but I would rather my company
right
use something more feature rich. So there's more behind the user friendly nature of what it is I see. But maybe that's a bit selfish. But
so what if everyone says that, though? What if everyone in the company wants user friendliness, but they want complex or more features for the rest of the company? No one's willing to accept.
Nobody's willing to accept the more complicated version. Then I think you got to go with user friendly. That's at the end of the day. We got a LinkedIn end users not only saying adoption is quicker, but adoption is the key, right? It doesn't matter how many features you have if you aren't going to use them, and you're going to do all of that nonsense in Excel anyway. So I would much rather have a user-friendly software. But if I could be in a position where my team was capable of understanding complex, feature-rich, then let's go for it.
Absolutely. Well, definitely, and it depends in there, but I'm glad everyone's picking it aside. So would you rather work with a software that is popular and widely used, or a software that is new and innovated but untested in the marketplace?
My response would be new and innovative.
Ooh.
Probably, I mean, mainly because if the more established vendors, oftentimes they're slower to change and they're less
Mhm.
focused on whatever function it is. I guess my caveat to that response is assuming that this newer innovative technology is more focused on what I need, then I'd rather have that newer technology that's more focused on what I need versus a more established one that's perhaps trying to be everything to everyone
Mhm.
or too rigid in its approach. Because if I'm using technology as a competitive differentiator and a way to get ahead, then I'd rather have the newer, more innovative one. And whatever technical deficiencies or functional deficiencies there are, those are easier to overcome than a lack of fit or lack of alignment with what I'm trying to do as a business.
Interesting. I thought you were gonna go the other way, but, Adam, what do you think about that one?
I'm definitely going the other way. We I don't know how many expert witness cases we've seen. It's like this is the first time anybody
Yeah.
implemented this, and it's a complete catastrophe.
Mhm.
I wouldn't want to be a guinea pig. So a proven software package, I think, is a much smaller risk, and I think it's less on the technology's responsibility to be innovative at your company than it is your business's responsibility to be innovative. So if you put the innovation of your business on your business people, then the technology just needs to support that. And if you get into the space where you are in a very niche industry that needs something very specific to be innovative, especially if your product is technology, that might sway the answer in the other direction. But for the most part, companies out there that are doing things that have been done for a long time are fairly well proven in a software package. There's a lot to be said for that. And I'd hate to be the first person who implemented SAP S4 HANA. But today, I'd be all right with that as long as you get it right. So I'd hate to be the first person who implemented NetSuite. Uh, but today, it's a proven software package. Works out great. It can be innovative and proven at the same time. And I would rather go with proven.
I like the
Absolutely.
comment. I like the comment that someone on LinkedIn said. I can't see the name of the person, but new and innovative. That's why I thought ahead and bought a Betamax, which is pretty funny. For those of you that don't know, it's the old before there was DVD, before there was VHS, there was something called Betamax, which was actually one of the pioneer, or it was kind of a pioneer, high quality way of portable electronic video watching, and it didn't quite last beyond a sort of a flash in the pan timeline.
So you may also remember HD DVD.
Yeah, right. Or
I have
works out
no
Blu-ray.
idea what you guys are talking about. No, I'm just
How
joking,
about
of course.
Blu-ray? That was another one,
Yeah, that was a flop as well, but, this
but high
LinkedIn
quality.
user yeah, right, says it depends on the situation and what I'm trying to help the client implement. That's what Adam and Eric wish they could say, but unfortunately, I'm forcing them into,
Yeah.
picking an answer in this one. And this one's really gonna just blow up the chat here because it's very controversial. Would you rather work with a software that is cloud-based or on-premise? And w
Cloud-based for sure. I want to set it and
Cloud-based.
forget it.
What about you, Eric?
I'd say both. Part cloud, part on premise. I'd put the commodity stuff in the cloud, like financials and GL, AP, reporting, analytics, stuff like that. And then I would put some of my customer facing or product facing or competitive differentiating functions on prem, or at the very least, it would be on prem, but or in the cloud, but single tenant. So I've got the ability to tailor it and customize it and that sort of thing. So I would do sort of a hybrid.
Hybrid. There we go.
Yeah.
And my last this or that question here, and then we'll get into those top 5 key lessons.
Actually, I wanna pick on that. You wanna be on the front edge of a technical and innovative new technical and innovative software, but you certainly can't let go of the on-premise, like, this seems contradictory here, Eric.
Well, I'm making a couple assumptions. One assumption is that the cloud stuff still isn't fully mature, right? In 5 years, I probably change this answer, 10 years, whatever it is. But right now, there's so much that's still immature. Some of those edge solutions. So I'm assuming, in a perfect world, if those edge solutions were
That
mature
they're
in the cloud, then it's,
unproven, right?
what's that?
That they're unproven, though, right?
Well, that's the thing. If they're on-prem, they are proven. They've been around for longer. So you've got.
But you want the unproven innovative software.
Oh,
That's
man.
true. That's why I'm going cloud too. That's why I'm hedging by having some
We'll call that
cloud.
a ish.
He's hit his
Hybrid-ish.
capacity of being able to be boxed in. He can't do that anymore. So,
Exactly. I had enough trouble with the last 2 questions where I had to
Yeah.
choose one or the other. I had to
yeah.
somewhere be in the middle.
My last one here is, would you rather work with a client that is incredibly technically sophisticated or a client that is more emotional intelligence and OCM focused, organizational change management focused? So, question there, because we have clients in all spheres of industries and businesses that are technical or non-technical. So I'm interested to hear what your preference would be if you could choose. Who's first? Not
I
everybody
have
at
a
once.
strong reaction to this. I have a very clear, strong reaction, which you probably already know. But I'd say emotionally intelligent. Even if they know nothing about technology, I'd rather take that organization because sometimes I don't want to say ignorance is bliss, but when it comes to technology, some of the most successful transformations we've been through have been with organizations that are highly emotionally intelligent and they lack technical capabilities or technical skills. But they have a way, those types of organizations have a way of not complicating things. They have a way of simplifying and a way of cherry picking and being more selective and deliberate about technology versus the more technical companies are more likely to get convoluted and confused and overly complex from a technical perspective, which just creates more problems on the human and operational side. So for sure, the emotionally intelligent, low technology type of company.
What about you, Adam?
I'm going to strike a middle ground and I'm going to say I would rather work for a client that understands the value of what it is they're hiring people for and where it is their needs are. You could be highly emotionally intelligent and have no idea about technology, but think you do. And that's a disaster. You could be technically inclined and be very educated in that, but know that you don't have the emotional intelligence or the change management know-how. And that's a far better scenario. So I would rather work with somebody that can be understanding of the big picture and the partnership involved, and know where it is, that have a self-awareness. So maybe that's a way of backing into the emotionally intelligent side of things. I'm not necessarily as worried about the change management or the technical management as I am about somebody who knows what they need, knows where their gaps are, so that I can help with that.
Very true. Yeah, and a lot of people are agreeing with you here. David on LinkedIn says EQ, you can teach tech easier than change behavior, which is so true. Um, and then adapting to change here, we have they can be quicker in adapting any change versus technically competent. So a lot of similar reactions to the audience. And we do have one other question that I feel like I have to ask at this point. Beatles or Elvis? Would you rather listen to the Beatles for the rest of your life or Elvis for the rest of your life? Since we
Beatles
are
for sure.
music focused here. What about
Be-
you, Adam?
That's a. I mean, it would have to be the Beatles because they've got a whole lot more out there. But I think if I had to commit to one particular music background, there's a bit more of a. I like the story of Elvis much better. So um, if it's just the music, it's got to be the Beatles. If it's the whole picture, it's Elvis.
Well, there we
What about
go.
the songwriting though? You can't beat John Lennon and Paul McCartney on the songwriting front. Elvis
You
didn't write
probably
his own
can't.
stuff.
But you know what? Elvis did perform the things that he did quite well.
Yeah,
He
true.
is the king of rock and roll. So
It's true. But the
I know.
Beatles evolved more. They pushed the boundaries more. They got weird in the 70s before they broke up.
Didn't we
As
Well,
far
all?
as
that's true for everybody though. So
Yeah,
that's true.
exactly. Exactly. Well,
um,
good. Well, if you have the audience members any more would you rather questions, go ahead and pop them in the comments.
Elvis is still alive. Yes.
Leave it to someone from the
See?
third stage
I
team
know,
to
right?
call
To
that out.
really just disrupt. Absolutely.
I
Um,
love it.
but if you have additional questions for Adam and Eric, as I pull them back on track here to talk about these top key lessons about digital transformation, go ahead and pop it in the comments wherever you're joining. I also encourage you to ask them questions in real time. As you see, we're pretty sophisticated and engaging with our audience, and which is the goal of all of these conversations. So with that, let's get into kind of the 5 key lessons that we look at. So I want to kind of go back to the importance of technology agnostic and independent advice in the overall digital transformation area, just to kind of set the baseline for why do companies like Third Stage or Third Stage advisors, why are they so important to have that perspective and that dedication to business goals in the overall dynamic of a digital transformation. So with that, let's go to Adam first as well.
What's the question?
He's still thinking about Beatles and Elvis.
I
I'm
know,
reading, I'm
right?
reading the chat
I
here.
should have
And it's
never
like,
started
wow.
with a game because now we can't know. So I asked, what is the importance of independent and technology advice or situations in the digital transformation marketplace? And it looks like probably one of our children interrupted him. So now we're going to go to Eric with that question. We have a 2 and a 4-year-old, so it's a wild time at the Cheatham household.
I like
So
how he just went off camera instead
yeah, he
of
was like, nope.
answering the question. He's
Yeah.
like, no, I don't like that question. Pass. So I guess I have to answer it.
Yeah, you do.
Um, yeah, so I think when I look at the industry and the reason I wanted to start a company that was independent and tech agnostic is just because the industry as a whole is the tech industry is so big and sophisticated and well designed to sell software. I mean, you've built not only software vendors, but a whole ecosystem of system integrators and consultants and industry analysts. They're all on the side of vendors. Vendors are using their money and influence to influence the market to adapt as much of their software as possible. And there's nothing wrong with the profit motive or capitalism, at least in my opinion, but it becomes a problem when you're a customer and you need someone to represent you and not the software vendors. It's just it's not a level playing field, or it hasn't been historically. And so having that independent agnostic advice to not only define what the best technology or technologies are for your organization, but just as importantly, how you implement that technology from an agnostic perspective that's not only focused on one vendor, but also not only focused on technology. Back to the EQ, the emotional intelligence question. You need a technology agnostic advisor that isn't myopically focused on deploying technology. You need someone that can look at the overall program management, the program strategy, the organizational change and adoption, and the business process reengineering, the integration and the data of multiple systems. All that stuff is stuff that's usually not done well by organizations or software vendors in their ecosystem.
Absolutely, well said.
To add on to that, the way that we think about digital transformation on the whole third stage is based on not as much ERP as a single software package anymore, but your digital enterprise operations as the goal of this, digitizing your operations at the enterprise level, right? So when you start thinking about it that way and think about the software ecosystem, not just the one ERP that becomes a piece of the puzzle, there are so many other plugins that you need that are not going to come from one vendor anymore. They just don't. The ERP packages today are not as mature as they were 5-10 years ago, because everybody's shifting to the cloud and this subscription-based platform. And so you end up having to plug things into each other. You end up having to manage a network of vendors towards the completion of a full transformation. You plug that network into your network as an organization. This gets really complex really fast. And so the challenges that you see in those spaces are really oriented towards, how do I manage all of these bits and pieces the realistic expectation that it's not all going to come from one place. So
Absolutely. And that kind of brings me into our first lesson, which is developing an enterprise digital strategy and the need for it to be across the business. A lot of times when we come into a remediation project or a transformation that might be in trouble, a lot of what we hear is this was an IT project and didn't consider the other pieces of the business that it touched. So, in moving to you, Eric, can you kind of define the importance of developing an enterprise strategy for digital transformation as opposed to just a compartmentalized strategy?
Sure. Well, just as the Beatles are far superior to Elvis, as we've already established. Just kidding. It's funny though how the chat is still
I know.
coming back to that question. Like someone just commented about how Elvis has more albums
He does.
than the Beatles.
Leave
It,
it to transformation folks to use data to say they've
right.
researched this in the minutes that we've had it. So thank you for that that
But
education.
but it made me wonder: does anyone really want to talk about digital transformation? Or are they more interested in Beatles versus Elvis? But I'd start now. I forgot your question. Sorry. I'm going to pull an Adam and say, can you repeat the question?
well, no, I think it's important to focus in on this. Where if you think about digital transformation, the Beatles create a really dynamic team, right? You need that in a lot of cases, but from a digital transformation perspective, having a good, strong leader that can really carry the weight starts to become the front end of it, which is why
Hmm.
Elvis is considered the king of rock and roll, because he's a
Ooh.
leader in the space, and the Beatles are a group of folks doing great work, but didn't really rise to that level of title because they couldn't handle each other.
Well, you see, Adam, that's where you're wrong because because you need a team to make a transformation successful. You can't just have a king like Elvis. You need a team of people, which is what's great about John, Paul, George, and Ringo. Is the Beatles aren't the Beatles without any one of them. Just like every organization isn't that organization without their key leaders and
That's
people. But
true. And I'd be willing to bet if we brought Elvis on here today, he would say that it's the team is really what makes his success. So I think he would
it's
give
true.
credit to that.
So we can agree on that. That's good. So we can agree
The
on that part
team's
of it.
necessary.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
There we go. Well, I
And
really didn't see this conversation unfolding this way when I picked the game, but I'm really glad that we can find some key nuances and lessons, right, from Elvis versus the Beatles, as well.
I
And
just look.
and
I love how Seth is taking it a whole new sort of
I
similar
know
direction. Seth on LinkedIn is talking about wings. I love it. He's let's go down another side detour with Paul McCartney in Wings. I like it.
we've got Nirvana in here, we've got Journey in here. So we've got a lot of music reference, and I should mention, or actually I'll let you mention, Eric, what is Third Stage named after?
Yes. So sorry, the chat's pretty funny today. I don't know. I don't know if we're doing a good
You
job
had
of
a
drawing
plan
out the
for
funny.
this conversation,
No,
right, Kyler? We're still on track for that.
I know,
yeah,
I guess, but
this whole conversation is going off the rails pretty quick, but I like it. So the name Third Stage is a two-part meaning or two-part metaphor or reference. One is a metaphor for a space launch. So third stage being a third stage boost that gets a rocket up to its ultimate height and speed. First and second stage is get it off the ground up into space, but then the third stage is what gets you into orbit. And so we just use that as a metaphor for digital transformations. They're difficult. It's hard to fight gravity and inertia. It's hard to get to that third stage of success, and there's a lot of risk along the way. So our job and our goal and our mission is to help clients through that journey to get to the third stage. But I'd love to say that whole analogy or that whole metaphor was my idea. I actually stole it from the band Boston, whose third album was called Third Stage, and they sort of made that not a concept album, but they made a whole album named Third Stage that was uh, based on that same metaphor for the rocket launch. Although they were trying to get a little deeper and make it about the third stage of life and middle age life, which is right where I am as well. But it's really the space metaphor and the rock and roll connection that where the origin comes from.
yeah, so we are on brand, right, with our
That's
conversation
true.
here about
Well, it's
music as well.
totally applicable, right? Like the last thing you really want in transformation is have success and then have all of your people leave.
Yeah.
We don't want to break up the band.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's a good point.
We don't want to break up the band. And so kind of pulling that into a context a contextual question. Our second lesson is embracing innovation. So we kind of talked about the importance of that innovation versus the balance of having a really established system. So I want to talk a little bit about the strategies for fostering an innovation within an organization to make sure you're getting in front of things like the resistance to change or the fear of new emerging technologies. So, Adam, can you talk a little bit about the importance of having that innovative mindset on your transformation core team?
Yeah. So I think that the reasoning behind this is what you want to get after, right? What are we trying to do with a digital transformation? And we are trying to gain efficiencies and effectiveness and additional visibility and transparency and all of these great things into our business. And we're talking about creating an innovative change. And that's the important part of the transformation. So if you don't respect the idea of innovation within this, you end up with just recoding your old processes and paying more money for them. That's
Mhm.
that's really the challenge there, right? And when you start to innovate your processes to fit that innovative technology, that's where you really start to strike a chord in how your business can change and adopt, and then you bring your people along with that, right? That's a key component as well. And either band that we're talking about, the Beatles versus Elvis, both disruptive, right? That's
Mhm.
part of what created change in the music scene and in around the world, really, for both of them. That disruptive nature, that willingness to look towards the future, is really a key component of a successful transformation. And innovation is a key component of that. You can't tell me that you want to recode your green screen processes into a brand new system and do the same business. That's not what anybody asks for.
Mhm.
So that's why that's such a key challenge there. All shook up. See, uh,
I had to bring that one up. You guys are killing it this morning. Absolutely killing it in the comments here, and I promise I will get to some of your actual, granular questions in here, after I let Eric respond to, the need for innovation on, the ERP core team or digital transformation core team.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a couple responses I have, or a couple things that come to mind when you talk about innovation. One is that, first of all, just focusing on innovation as a whole and not just assuming that just because you're replacing technology means that therefore you're going to become more innovative as an organization. There's a lot more you have to do than just put the technology and tools in place. You have to change the culture, you have to change your
Mhm.
processes, you have to change the way you think as an organization, which leads to a second point, which is you have to be measured about your journey towards innovation. Too many organizations try to take too big of a leap and they try to cram too much change and innovation in too short of a time when perhaps they're a risk adverse, well
Mhm.
established, mature organization that just isn't going to adapt to that level of innovation that quickly. Not to say you can't push the needle and nudge the needle that direction, but typically the innovation and building that culture and building that mindset takes a lot longer than it takes to deploy technology. And so you have to recognize and just sort of pace yourself in that journey and be realistic and self-aware of where you are as an organization right
Mhm.
now. And if you're super risk adverse, you have highly tenured staff, you're a company that's been around for 200 years, just recognize that. And you're not going to change that fact, but that doesn't mean that you necessarily need to jump off the deep end and just, go all in on a big, massive transformation that doesn't align with, what you're capable of adapting in the short term. So I think it's just a matter of looking to the future, but also being realistic about where you are and understanding how big of a jump you're taking and planning and executing accordingly.
Yeah. Very similar to what we're getting in the comments. Kasan on LinkedIn said, "Innovate process, educate people, own technology change and adaptation," which is so important. And I think it brings us to our third lesson, which is a culture of readiness. So let's talk a little bit more about the importance of assessing the readiness or the current state of the organization, because we see a lot of really well-intentioned clients come to us saying we want to do A, B, and C. However, sometimes we have to be sort of that litmus test and that reminder that there's only so much you can accomplish with the current state that you have. And sometimes it's better on that phased approach. So, Eric, can you answer that for us? What's the importance of understanding your current state and your readiness to actually undergo a big change like a digital transformation?
Well, I think it's hugely important, and it's probably the most underrated preparation step that
Hmm.
organizations fail to look at, simply because they focus on, similar to my answer about innovation, they focus so much on the technology and all the great cool stuff that technology can do, and they want to take these quantum leapfrog sort of advances in their business, which is a great vision to have, but then they fail on recognizing what the execution is going to take. They go talk to a software vendor who says, yep, we could deploy this whole tool set that's going to make you so innovative and create this culture of readiness. We can deploy it in 18 months, and which they probably can. I rarely question a technical vendor's ability to implement in a certain amount of time, but that's usually not the problem or the bottleneck. The problem or the bottleneck is creating that culture and being ready as an organization and moving the needle of humans and the operations to keep up with the advances in technology. And one thing I was talking to about with one of our other colleagues here in the office yesterday, who's going to be on this podcast here in a couple weeks, is we're talking about that growing divide between technology and humans, and how
Hmm.
technology is changing exponentially faster than the ability of humans. And that gap, as that gap gets wider, the risk profile and the failed expectations or the letdown that comes along with that
Hmm.
becomes greater, because organizations simply can't keep up with technology. So you have to sort of just accept it for what it is, and again, try to move the needle in that direction, get your organization ready, move the organization along, but recognize that your technology advances don't matter if your people and the operations can't keep up with it.
For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. And I got to bring this one up so Adam has some context. So we're going to football now.
That's a
Um,
great.
so yeah, Brett Favre, the farther you throw down the field, the more likely it is to get intercepted. And we're talking American football here. We don't need to get in the argument about what is football, if unless we want to, because we're just going
You
all over
know,
the place. But what's your
Brett
reaction to
Favre
that,
has
Adam?
records for touchdowns and interceptions, so
Yeah,
let's be fair to that. But it's at the end of the day, I think you got to focus on what's realistic. If you got a shot at it, yeah, business is about taking chances. It's everything you do in business from a day to day perspective is a risk in and of itself, right? Some of them are lower risks, some of them are higher risks, like 5 yards versus 60. But at the same time, sometimes you got to go for it. Sometimes you got to know where your limits are, right? Um, if you ask me to throw a football down the field, I'd be surprised if anybody caught it. So
that's
there's also
even.
that. But understanding who you are, and this kind of goes back to that earlier question on EQ versus technical capability, you got to know what it is your capacity for change is and how big of a change we're making, right? We got some folks that are moving from a semi-modern ERP to a modern ERP, ECC6 to S4 HANA, or EBS to ERP Cloud, or an older version of M4 to a newer version of M4. They're all moving from something that was implemented in the early 2000s to something that was designed to be implemented now. And then there are folks who are literally telling us we have been on this software since 1980. That change is going to be more significant, and so
Hmm.
the scope and the magnitude of that change is a key component of it, right? How far are we going, and then what are our people's capacity for change? Folks that tend to change more regularly tend to be a little bit more caught up. So the farther behind you are, that's usually an indicator that you're also going to struggle with the ability to capture that change. So that's where I think about readiness to get back to that conversation, which is knowing who you are and what you're working with. How far are we going? What does our future state look like? Not everybody out there needs to be on the bleeding edge of technology, and there are more traditional industries that are going to be more conservative in where it is they're going to go. So they don't want to be on the cloud. They don't want to be on the front end of it, and that's okay. That moves the baseline of change back a little bit, makes it maybe more attainable. So how much change can we consume at once? And then your plan should realize that, right? We want to take this in digestible bites. as opposed to all at once. So that's the way I think about readiness, and understanding where it is you're coming from, where it is you're going, and how it is you're going to be able to get there. What tools you have, those types of things.
Absolutely. Yeah, those incremental steps, certainly, that's definitely important to kind of understand. Um,
So I'm still on the Brett Favre thing. I have to come back to that for a second because I have an important analogy here. So we're based. So Third Stage as a company is based in Denver. Our global headquarters is based in Denver, and that's where I am today. And you guys are close to Denver as well. But the reason I bring up Denver is because Brett Favre or Denver Broncos, the first Super Bowl they won was against Brett Favre. And if you look at the stats of that game, I mean, Brett Favre did the Brett Favre stuff. He had more passes, he had more yards. John Elway from the Denver Broncos did not have a great game, but he made the critical plays where he needed to. He made the short passes. He had one play that was a critical first down where he ran the ball himself for 5 yards, which he never did. That wasn't his style. And he got hit really hard. And he helicoptered up in the air and hit the ground. And it's like a classic, one of the greatest plays in Denver Broncos history. But that play was largely attributed to why the Broncos won. Now, the reason I'm bringing this all up and tying it back to digital transformation is it was the Broncos won with a really measured strategic approach that was not focused on flashy long passes. It was focused on short passes. It was focused on running the ball with Terrell Davis, and it just wore down the Bronco or the Packers, the Green Bay Packers, which is who Brett Favre played for. It wore down their defense over time, and the Denver Broncos were smaller. They weren't favored. They were the underdogs. But to me, that's a good analogy for digital transformations. I mean, you don't have to take the long, deep pass and hope that someone catches it. It's usually more effective, and you have a higher likelihood of success to take those smaller, measured approaches or steps in your transformation. So I'm trying really hard. It might be a stretch. I'm trying really hard to bring the analogy full circle back to digital transformation here.
Yeah, I'm going to
Yeah.
poke a big hole in that and ask, how many attempts did it take? How many failed shots at this did John Elway have before he got it right?
3. He lost 3.
Yeah.
I think he lost 3 times before he won. But that's another important lesson, is because organizations we work with, clients that we work with, the most successful ones are the ones that have failed in the past. The ones that are the highest risk and the hardest ones to work with are the ones that they've never been through a transformation or they've never failed in a transformation. Then they get this false sense of confidence. They have blind spots. So I think the reason John Elway won that Super Bowl is because he had lost 3 times and because he was older and wiser, wasn't as athletic and youthful as he was back in their first Super Bowls, but he ends up winning as an old dude. So
yeah,
There you go.
a good point.
Well, that's important to understand the power of failure, right? Which kind of brings me to our last lesson, which is investing in the right technology. Because a lot of times we see that failure stem from having a mismatch in selecting the technology for your organization, which can be a very complex undertaking because of the saturation in the marketplace, because of the agendas of vendors when they come in and do demos, which is something we help kind of remediate. Can you guys talk about why it's so important to select the right technology for your organization, whether that is a core ERP or a best of breed application solution, those types of things? So, Adam, let's start with you on that one.
Yeah. So a moment ago, we talked about how big of a change is it, and what's your capacity for accepting that change, right? Uh, the end point, the front end of that future state is going to be partially based on your technology. Your technology is going to be part of your future state. They're going to be bound together. That's the idea here, right? So if you take a technology that's going to fit your business needs, your level of change is smaller. But if you take something that's a poor fit, the level of change is more significant, more complex, right? You got to
Hmm.
start thinking about, am I changing software or am I changing my processes? And the more often you have to ask that question, the more complicated things get. And it's not a net add. It's not just one more thing and one more. Every one more thing is an exponential increase for your complexity, in the complexity of the change that you're seeking. And so you're creating, with a poor software fit, you're creating a bigger gap between where you are today and your future state, from a perspective of how much change are we going to go through. And not only are you increasing the size of that gap, you're also adding a whole lot of obscurity to it. And how it is do we figure this out? It creates
Hmm.
dependencies on your system integrators, which is never a good thing from a perspective of how do we solve these problems, you start to create a knee-jerk reaction, which is just put it back the way it was, which is an indicator of not accepting change and reverting to the old ways. There's the better the software fit and the better the technology strategy and the digital roadmap that you have based on your business needs and objectives, the more you can control the scope of that change. And that's a really powerful thing to be able to do.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Well said. What's your reaction to that, Eric?
that's hard to follow. That was really well said.
It was.
So I kept thinking of stuff that I wanted to add, and then you would go ahead and cover it. So you stole all my thunder, Adam. I've got nothing. No, I would just say that it's hard to force a square peg into a round hole. And
Mhm.
while a moment ago I did say technology is usually the least of the concerns, it can be a concern though if you don't have the right fit of technology. And I think this is especially true when you start to look at some of the unique aspects of your business. And when I say unique aspects of your business, I don't mean unique because you just refuse to change and it's just the way you've always done it. I mean, because it's a competitive differentiator, it's part of your industry, it's sort of a customer requirement, something you need to be successful and to beat your peers or to be better than your peers in the industry. So when you get to those areas, that's where you're more likely not to have a fit. And that's where you're more at risk of force fitting technology in places where it shouldn't be. And when I say technology, I don't mean that no technology would fit, but a vendor A may not fit into that need. And so you have to be creative and open to looking at what are our options. We could go with the best of breed model. We could custom develop a solution that we own that gives us that competitive differentiator and satisfies our needs better than an off the shelf system. Those are the sorts of trade-offs and decisions you need to make sure that you're not just assuming that one size fits all and that one technology can handle all of your needs.
Absolutely. And we got an interesting comment here that I want to bring up, which I should have asked in our would you rather. I can't believe I missed this one. Would you rather have a core ERP system or a best of breed approach? And so this is kind of answering that. Don't underestimate the level of technical acumen you will need in order to maintain a hybrid architecture that results from a best of breed approach. And that's something we talk a lot about in interoperability, which is part of kind of our overall digital strategy, which we talked about in lesson one. And just real quick before I let Adam and Eric respond to that comment, we do have a variety of best of breed versus ERP content on not only our YouTube channel, but Eric's YouTube channel. And he did a recent talk on it on our ground control podcast, which this overall will be featured in as well. So if you haven't seen any of those, definitely hop over to his channel and you can check them out there. But what's your thoughts on kind of that best of breed versus core ERP, which is a main thought track in the industry right now?
Well, my opinion on that is, it depends, first of all, but more often than not, best of breed or some sort of limited best of breed is going to be um, more feasible for most organizations, unless you're a younger, smaller, more, I hate to say generic, but just more of a common basic organization that doesn't have very complex needs in its system. I actually have a YouTube video that's coming out next week on my YouTube channel. In fact, if you look real carefully, behind me there, you can see, I don't know if you can see the whiteboard there. I'll turn it just
Oh
a little bit
yeah.
there.
Ooh, a little
So
behind the scenes
yeah, this is
there.
what's left over from that video. So you get to, that's just like a sneak preview of a video that's not
Ooh.
out yet. But if you want to see, what the hell all that means, you can see on my YouTube channel in a couple of weeks. I talk about the pros and cons of single ERP system versus best of breed and whatnot. So, but I think in general, single ERP is sort of like that utopia. Back to the unicorns and dragons.
Mhm,
Single ERP is like the unicorns and dragons view of the world. You
mhm.
think it exists, but really it doesn't. It'd be cool if it did, but single ERP is not realistic for most organizations. Software vendors will absolutely disagree with me on that, and they will fight me to the end on that point. But I strongly believe it, and because I'm not trying to sell you software, but you can have a core single ERP system, but then you're inevitably probably going to need some sort of best of breed bolt-ons and applications to meet all the complex requirements, especially if you're a larger, global, more complex organization.
Well, I think that goes to just the state of the market right now too, right? 10 years ago, when it's Oracle EBS versus SAP ECC6, I think that answer is different. you could get it all in one box. But technology has evolved since then to not only add more functionality to the availability in the market, but those software platforms are changing. So you more or less can't buy more EBS or ECC6 anymore. You got to go ERP Cloud or S4HANA or the whole slew of all of these other things that are moving to cloud. Those are packages that had 30 plus years of development behind them in the real live world and in the market to grow to that level of completion and maturity. And I mean, what for HANA might be 15 years old tops at this point, and it's still kind of in an infancy stage in many ways, right? So there's just not that level of time that's been devoted to growing that software package. So, and this applies not just to SAP, all of them. NetSuite, there's a different argument for because they've been in that space quite a lot longer. So their spread is a little bit more, a little bit wider. But at the end of the day, they're not running a lot of multi-billion-dollar companies. So there's that side of it. The maturity in software creates holes today, and those
Mhm.
holes are filled by other best of breed niche packages that are important too. And what will happen is the big guys will buy them all up and they'll put them in their software systems. And in another 10 years, this conversation might be quite different, just because of the evolution of software in and of itself. So I think that's a key component of it, where you just don't get all of the core functionality that you used to because it doesn't exist anymore, because it's been innovated into a cloud environment, and that's a part of the challenge. So you got to those functions are still necessary. Somebody's doing them, but it's not the big box ERPs anymore. It's a little bit more of the add-ons and the more niche-based, smaller software packages. So that's how I
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, I want to turn to our audience for some questions here in our last couple minutes because this is an interesting question on data quality and that overall interoperability, which is sharing all of your data and actually having a full visibility across the enterprise, which is the importance of a full enterprise digital strategy. And data quality is something that we see a lot of clients struggle with. So interested to hear your thoughts on this one. And Eric, we'll start with you.
Well, I think, data quality is one of those things that I always thought was overrated. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if you would have asked me, I thought data migration was again getting too myopically focused on the technical aspects of an implementation. But I think nowadays, regardless of whether I was right or wrong back then, I think nowadays I'm definitely wrong when it comes to that. You definitely need to focus on data quality, partly because so much of the value of technology is increasingly becoming about business intelligence and predictive analytics and artificial intelligence, all these really cool technologies that can and have the potential to transform a business, but they can't without having good data and a good handle
Yeah.
on your data. So I think more and more organizations need to treat data as an asset. Maybe it's not on your balance sheet, but it is something that maybe it should be, because that data is really a core competitive advantage, or can be, of organizations that manage it well.
Absolutely. And what's your
But
thoughts, Adam?
I think for me, it's data is not going to be the reason that your transformation was successful, but it can very much be the reason that it wasn't. So
That's a good
you
point.
have to get it right. It's just the same way as the oil in your car isn't what's going to drive it. But if you don't take care of it, it will ruin your car. So that's how I generally think about the data side of it. Is that it is critically important. And if it becomes your critical path in your implementation, you're in a bad spot. So getting ahead of it and having it done well is important, but it's more of a you have to do that right and get all of the other things right. It won't be the reason that you go live successfully. It will be a part of that.
It's sort of like the George Harrison of the Beatles. You've got John and Paul, which everyone talks about, but George Harrison, without George Harrison and the guitar and the cool songs that he wrote, the Beatles wouldn't be the Beatles. And so you kind of need that piece of it. You have to have all those pieces, and data is like that. That's a bit of a stretch, I'll admit, but there you go. George Harrison and data.
There you go. Wow, way to really put a bow on that and bring it back to
I'm trying hard.
Yeah, right, absolutely. Oh, we have Star Trek has entered the chat. We're not even going to start on that overall Star Trek versus Star Wars, um but in kind of, rounding out this conversation, we have a big milestone here with our 5th-year anniversary, and we wouldn't have all of that great content to share without our wonderful audience and our engaging community. So just a reminder on how you can kind of create that relationship with us and continue to help grow that really integrity-focused, mission-driven community in the software space. We do have 2 different podcasts you can subscribe to. One is shorter form Digital Stratosphere, and one is Transformation Ground Control, which is our longer form podcast and comes out every Wednesday. It does live stream as well to Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And then all of these questions I ask Eric at the beginning of our Transformation Ground Control sessions. I bring them back so that we can make sure that we get in here and comment on all of those things. We also have a living, breathing blog that is updated every week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, that has new content based on what we're putting in the marketplace, and also a ton of thought leadership on Eric's YouTube channel and the Third Stage YouTube channel, which includes and is based on that digital transformation 2023 report, which you can download up here in the corner or in the comments section, wherever you're getting them. But thank you for this unbelievable conversation and the great audience that you've helped us kind of build on this company. And thank you to Eric and Adam for all of your great insight into the top lessons learned in this last 5 years. And most importantly, congratulations.
Thank you. Congratulations to you guys and everyone else on the Third Stage team too. I know there's several or a handful of people from Third Stage listening in right now, and we'll watch this after the fact. So congratulations to the entire team, because we wouldn't be here and we wouldn't have grown nearly as much if we didn't have such an awesome team supporting us.
Absolutely.
Including both of you, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Well, great. And thank you so much for joining us today. And final thoughts, Beatles rule.
Adam disagrees.
Yeah, right. All right.
Elvis is still alive.
Oh,
So.
okay.
True. It's all that matters.
Well, right. With that, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.